If you want to paint like a hyper-realistic, cool-toned bluebird, what is the very first color you should put on your empty canvas?
I mean, your intuition just screams blue, right? Or maybe, I don't know, a cool neutral gray.
Right, exactly. But if you actually follow that instinct, you're going to end up with a painting that looks, well, it looks like a cheap sticker just slapped onto a background.
Yeah, it completely flattens it.
It really does. Because the actual answer, the real color that forms the foundation of this cool bluebird, is this muddy, earthy orange.
Which is so counterintuitive, but, we are just so easily seduced by the surface of things. When you stand in a gallery and look at a masterpiece, you're really only observing the very last decision the artist made. But a painting isn't just a single flat image. It's this massive accumulation of invisible decisions. It's a dense architecture of layers.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. For this deep dive, we are opening up a document that deconstructs this exact architecture. We're looking at the meticulous step-by-step methodology of master artist Laura Palacios from Grupo Rime.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. We're looking at her process of painting a bird in acrylics.
But the mission here is it's way bigger than just a technical walkthrough. We want to take you inside the mind of a master. We're going to show you how depth and naturalism and texture are actually constructed right from the very first brushstroke.
You're going to see the hidden, invisible strategies that, pull a subject out of a flat, lifeless canvas and literally make it breathe.
Because this document, it really plays out like a masterclass in visual psychology.
Yeah.
Every single choice she makes, the drying times, the brush bristles, the shadow temperatures, it's all calculated.
Completely calculated. She's manipulating how the human brain actually perceives light and space. But to understand her genius, I think we have to start with the most common trap in art, which is the terrifying empty flat canvas.
Yes. Let's talk about that trap. Because the most frequent visual error I see in amateur art, and honestly, the wall I hit whenever I've tried to paint, is that artificial flatness. A sticker effect. Yeah, exactly. The sticker effect. The subject just feels completely disconnected from its environment.
Right, and it's important to realize that the sticker effect is a perceptual error. It's not a failure of, hand-eye coordination.
Oh, really? It's not just a lack of skill.
No, I mean, beginners just try to paint the final color directly onto the white canvas.
Yeah.
They look at a blue bird, they go buy a tube of blue paint, and they just slap it on. But human perception is, it's infinitely more complex than that.
Because we don't see colors in isolation, right?
Exactly. In the natural world, you never, ever see a color in absolute isolation. The color of a real bird is constantly being affected by the ambient light of the sky or, shadows cast by leaves, humidity in the air.
The dirt on the ground reflecting light back up.
Exactly. And a stark white canvas completely lacks that atmospheric reality. It's just a void.
Which brings us to Laura Palacios' first move. To paint this bird that's dominated by cold blues and grays, she begins with a completely contradictory action.
It's so fascinating to watch.
She mixes orange, warm white, and just a tiny amount of raw umber. She creates this muted, luminous, warm terracotta color, and then she takes a physical sponge and scrubs it over every single inch of the canvas.
She is just obliterating that stark white emptiness. And notice she uses a sponge instead of brush.
Right. Why a sponge?
Because it creates this irregular, stippled texture. It ensures the paint doesn't just, sit flat on the surface. It physically works it into the weave of the fabric.
Okay, I follow the logic of getting rid of the white. But wait, putting down a warm, earthy orange background for a picture that's going to be incredibly cold and blue?
I know, it sounds crazy.
It sounds like putting down a carpet of sand before you try to carve an ice sculpture. I mean, if I want the final image to feel like a crisp, cool morning, doesn't a warm orange base just ruin the purity of the blue?
You'd think so, but no. The reason that warm orange sand is absolutely necessary is that it becomes the invisible structure of the piece.
Invisible structure.
Yeah. If she started with cold colors on a cold white canvas, the final painting would look sterile, like a clinical illustration in the textbook. By forcing the entire canvas into this earthy orange frequency first, she creates a unifying baseline.
So every single layer that comes next is forced to dialogue with that warmth.
Precisely. Even when the painting is completely finished and we can't explicitly see that orange layer anymore, it is still doing work. It never stops working.
It's just quietly influencing the temperature of the blue sitting on top of it.
Exactly. In painting, the thing that sustains everything we see is often exactly what remains invisible. But there's a strict technical discipline here, too. Once she applies that orange foundation, she just stops.
He walks away.
She lets it dry perfectly.
Well, acrylic paint dries pretty fast, though, right?
It does dry fast, but it still needs time to cure. And curing is the key word here. I mean, acrylics are basically liquid plastics. As they dry, the polymers physically link together to form a solid film.
Okay, so if she gets impatient,
if she adds the next layer while the orange is even slightly damp, the colors will just physically mix. You get a muddy mess. By letting it cure, she completely locks that warm foundation into place permanently.
all right, so the foundation is locked. Now, the canvas actually needs a background, the atmosphere behind the bird. And this is the moment where my instinct would be to finally grab that vibrant, straight out of the tube blue paint.
Right. The fun part.
Yeah, but jumping to a pure blue would just instantly destroy that delicate, earthy groundwork she just laid down.
Completely. This whole next phase is about taming the tube color. The document shows Laura preparing a gradient for the background, and again, she's using a sponge to keep the texture organic.
Darker at the top, fading to lighter at the bottom.
Exactly. But look at the colors she selects. Cobalt blue, warm white, and crucially, just a tiny pinch of raw umber.
Okay, I follow the white to lighten the blue for the gradient. But the raw umber really throws me off. Raw umber is basically just the color of dark, muddy dirt. Why on earth would you inject dirt into a pristine, beautiful sky blue?
Because that pristine, beautiful sky blue is perceptually false.
That's false. How?
If you squeeze pure cobalt blue directly out of a tube, it has this chemical purity that just simply does not exist in nature. Nature is inherently chaotic. Real atmosphere is full of dust particles, moisture, bouncing light.
Right, all the stuff in the air.
Yeah, physicists call it Rayleigh scattering. So that tiny pinch of muddy raw umber basically grounds the cobalt blue. It drags the chemical pigment back into the natural world by breaking its artificial perfection.
It roughs it up just enough to make our brains accept it as real air. That makes so much sense. But the document points out that the true revelation isn't even just the umber mixed into the blue. It's the specific physical application.
This is where it gets really brilliant.
She doesn't paint a thick, opaque wall of this new blue mixture. She applies it translucently. She deliberately allows that warm orange base to breathe through the blue layer.
Yes. She is essentially building a translucent blue window over a warm orange wall. And this triggers one of the most profound optical phenomena in all of art. Optical neutralization.
Okay, break that down for me. What is happening physically when a viewer looks at this?
Think about the physics of light. The ambient light from the room you're standing in travels through that translucent layer of blue paint. It passes through the blue pigment, hits the warm orange base underneath, and then reflects back out.
So the light is bouncing back through the blue a second time, straight into my cornea.
Exactly. The colors are physically mixing inside the viewer's eye, not on the artist's palette.
Oh, wow.
Because if you mix blue and orange directly on a wooden palette, the pigments chemically absorb each other's light frequencies. You just end up with a flat, lifeless gray. That's subtractive mixing.
Right, you just get mud.
Right. But when you layer them translucently on the canvas, you get additive optical mixing. It generates this natural vibrating depth that is literally impossible to achieve with flat, opaque paint.
That is wild. So true depth isn't just painted onto a canvas. It's an actual physical trick of light trapped between layers of acrylic polymer.
You're turning the canvas into a machine that captures and alters light.
Okay, so we have this vibrating, luminous background established. The stage is completely set. My instinct tells me this is the moment you finally grab the vibrant colors for the bird's feathers and bring the subject in.
And you'd be wrong again.
I would, because looking at the master's process, the final colors are still aggressively delayed.
If she added the final plumage colors right now, the bird would flatten out immediately. Before the bird can have feathers, it has to have bones.
The underpainting phase.
Exactly. We are entering the underpainting.
So she brings out the raw umber again. No blues, no vibrant colors at all, just raw umber to map out the entire physical structure of the bird. She's sketching the main masses, mapping the volume, carving out the light and shadow of the head, the chest, the wings. And gradually, she just works a bit of cobalt blue into the umber to drop the absolute deepest shadows into almost black territory.
But notice the logic of her lighting at this stage. You know that background blue gradient we just spent so much time building?
Yes.
That is now functioning as the ambient light source for the bird. The layers of raw umber she's adding are constructing the areas where that light simply cannot reach.
She is strictly building volumetric form.
Right. She's making sure that no single brushstroke destroys the structural information established by the previous one. And all the while, that atmospheric background is still peeking through the loose edges of the shadows she's blocking in.
It really feels much more like watching a sculptor working in 2 dimensions. She isn't coloring in a drawing like a coloring book. She is physically carving this bird out of shadow before she ever gives it the life of color.
That's a great analogy.
It's like building the skeleton before you even think about wrapping it in skin.
And that structural discipline is exactly what separates a master from an amateur. Every single time she lets a layer of umber dry, she's locking in a new architectural truth. Each layer rests on the previous one, like interlocking stones.
So the richness of the final image relies entirely on this progression.
Entirely. Because if she had just painted a flat brown bird silhouette and tried to add delicate feather details on top of it, it would immediately revert right back to that flat sticker effect. The visual complexity comes from the background breathing through the shadows.
Okay, so the bones of the bird are solid. We have volume, we have deep shadows. But looking at the document, the subject still lacks a heartbeat. It looked like a beautifully carved wooden statue, honestly.
Right, it's structurally sound, but it's cold.
Exactly. To bring it to life, she has to introduce the next critical element, which is temperature.
The illusion of biological life in painting is intimately tied to temperature. It's this constant microscopic push and pull between warm and cool frequencies.
And this is where she finally introduces yellow ochre. She starts weaving warmth and clarity into the plumage. And against that cold, atmospheric blue background we built earlier, this yellow ochre creates a massive, sharp contrast.
Huge contrast.
Then come the vibrant oranges, the warm whites, and these tiny, super deliberate touches of red. But she doesn't just paint these warm colors in flat, solid blocks over the umber.
No, because a flat block of yellow would completely suffocate the shadows beneath it. She relies on a very specific physical tool at this exact moment.
The open bristle brush.
Yes.
It's a brush where the hairs are intentionally separated, almost frayed looking. It allows her to make multiple, distinct marks simultaneously with just a single flick of her wrist.
It's brilliant.
By using that open brush, she isn't covering up the underpainting. The brush splits the paint into fine filaments, allowing the new warm colors to literally weave into the cold shadows she already established.
It's incredible to watch. Every single touch suggests individual feathers. It turns what was just a solid mass of umber shadow into a complex, delicate, overlapping structure.
So the cold shadows and the warm highlights are sitting right next to each other, creating this intense visual vibration.
Right, and the human brain translates that extreme contrast of interlaced cold and warm colors as energy, as a pulse. When our eyes see a warm yellow ochre sitting literally millimeters away from a cool cobalt shadow, the optic nerve fires rapidly.
And because of the open bristle tool she chose, every layer is adding new visual information without erasing the history of the painting.
Exactly.
It's like digging through archaeological layers, but instead of dirt, you are sifting through light and temperature.
That's a perfect way to put it. At this late stage in the process, the viewer is no longer looking at acrylic pigment. They're looking at light that has been intricately trapped within multiple textured layers. The subtle violet nuances, the deep burgundy tones in the shadows, the chromatic vibrations across the chest, they all emerge because that cold background and those umber bones are still participating. They're still breathing through the warm, separated brushstrokes of the feathers.
Okay, so the architecture is fully built. The temperature is vibrating, the bird looks incredibly real, the texture of the feathers is undeniable, but to pull the bird fully out of the canvas, to make it cross that final threshold into our reality, it needs one last decisive action from the master.
The final accents, the absolute extreme peaks of light.
She switches her tool one last time, she abandons the open bristles entirely and takes a sharp, flat brush, and she applies the ultimate accents of maximum clarity.
The specular highlights.
Yes. These tiny, extreme, opaque points of pure white light on the very edge of the feathers, maybe a glint on the dark, wet curve of the eye, or the sharp tip of the beak. It is literally just a tiny dot of paint, but it completely transforms the image.
Why do you think such minuscule interventions carry such enormous, disproportionate visual weight?
Honestly, They anchor the entire reality of the subject. It is exactly like the final focus pull in a camera lens. You know when you're watching a film and the shot is just like slightly soft, slightly ethereal, and then the focus puller dials the ring perfectly into place?
Oh, yeah.
Certainly, all those meticulously planned invisible layers we've been talking about, the orange base, the raw umber shadows, the woven temperatures, they all just snap into sharp, undeniable reality. The eye finally has a hard edge to lock onto.
That is exactly it. The soft focus of the underpainting relies on blended edges and translucent glazes. But the specular highlight, that final dot of pure white, is the sharp edge that defines the physical nature of the object.
Because that's how it works in nature,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
In the natural world, specular highlights are the final visual cues our brains use to decode texture. That tiny point of light tells us exactly how wet and spherical the eye is, how rigid the beak is, or how soft and matte the feather is. It's entirely based on how the light catches its very edge. They bring the entire architectural structure into sharp focus.
It is the period at the end of a very long, very complex sentence. And this is the profound revelation of Lord Palacios' process and of Grupo Ram's methodology as a whole. The jaw-dropping results of master artists do not come from a single spectacular color.
No, there is no magic tube of hyper-realistic bird blue you can buy at an art supply store.
Right.
The mastery is found entirely in the patient, deeply intelligent construction of relationships. It's the relationship between the warm terracotta orange and the cool cobalt blue, the relationship between the translucent glaze and the opaque highlight, between the smooth, stippled background and the separated, textured feathers. So the finished, beautiful painting is really just the physical evidence that this deeply intellectual process actually happened. The true magic, the absolute genius of the master's process, lies entirely in the invisible structures that almost no one ever sees.
The final layer is simply the skin over a very complex, breathing skeleton.
It's incredible. Well, to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, and I think it applies far beyond the edges of canvas. Think about how we perceive reality itself in our daily lives. When we look at a person or a complex political situation, or even just a landscape on our commute, we usually only judge the final layer. We judge the immediate surface, the behavior, or the color we see in that exact fleeting moment. We basically just react to the sticker on the surface.
We really do.
But what if we started looking for the warm orange base layers in our everyday reality? What if we actively looked for the translucent shadows in the histories of the people around us? How much more depth and empathy and fundamental understanding would we find if we actively looked for the invisible structures holding everything up?
Because the invisible structure is always there. It's quietly dictating the surface if you just develop the patience to look for it.
Exactly. Because just like in a master's painting, the most vital structural parts of a person's story are off of the layers you can't immediately see. Next time you look at a painting or a person's astrobate, remember to look past that final layer of color. We will catch you on the next deep dive.